Welcome back. At an agglomeration council meeting on December 21st, that's all the municipalities on the island of Montreal, there were questions from citizens about Hampstead Mayor Jeremy Levi's comments on the conflict between Israel and Hamas. And since then, there's been a lot of reactions and a major controversy, not only on the comments that were made by citizens during that question period, but also about Mayor Plante's response. She presides the council, and she's made some comments since then, and that led to a complaint made to the Municipal Commission of Quebec, which is the body that oversees all municipalities across Quebec. And that complaint was made by B'nai Brith. So we will turn to our very good friend of CJAD 800, former Montreal City Councilor and at B'nai Brith, Marvin Rotrand is on the line. Thank you so much for your time, Marvin.
Thank you for the invitation, David.
So maybe I tried to give the best summary possible of this situation, but maybe you want to drill down on what actually happened on December 21st, which led ultimately to B'nai Brith filing a complaint with the Municipal Commission of Quebec.
Well, the story actually begins on December 18th, and that seems to have slipped by. Nobody's noticed that. A number of individuals came to City Hall to ask questions, which were actually thinly veiled attacks against Israel and its rights to exist. And basically, these questions went to Mayor Plante and her Montreal City Council House Leader, Alexander Norris. Mm-hmm. And they essentially said, well, if you're not happy with the mayor of Hampstead, you should come to the agglomeration council and ask these questions directly to him. And a ton of people did on the 21st. They were responding to a direct and sympathetic invitation from Valerie Plante, where he was targeted. Now, he wasn't at the meeting of December 21st. Hampstead had another councillor from its council as a delegate to represent the mayor, and that was Jack Adary. The questions were basically ones that we think crossed the fine line between free speech and hate speech, called out Israel's right to exist and defend itself in face of the Hamas terrorist attack. But Levy was on the spot because they were saying, well, you're promoting genocide because you have a bylaw that punishes people who tear down posters saying free the hostages. Now, you can imagine how that plays with the Jewish community. Here are people seemingly trying to say it's okay for Hamas to attack Israel and taking 250 people as hostages, and that the mayor is promoting genocide by having a bylaw passed in Hampstead because many posters were torn down. The idea of the bylaw was supposed to be dissuasive so people wouldn't do that. And, it's continued since, and Valerie Plante says, hey, this is free speech. We look at it, and we see a pattern. A few months ago, the city's anti-racist commissioner, Bashra Manaev, was called out widely, not only by Jewish groups, by other groups, in the midst of a period of time when there were shots fired at Jewish schools, attempted arsons against communal buildings. She was taking part in hateful rallies where, and one of them, a local imam, made veiled threats against the Jewish community that Prime Minister Trudeau and Premier Legault said were absolutely anti-Semitic and inciting violence. And I believe there's a police investigation whether hate crime charges are going to be filed eventually in that case. And though the Prime Minister and the Premier weighed in, Bashra Manahi has not condemned those remarks. No. She hasn't said, no, I shouldn't have been there. We haven't heard clearly from her an apology to the Jewish community, which would have been the minimum, with Valerie Plante basically covering for her. And we know there's a lot of sympathy in the Plante administration and Project Montreal for people who are, in our opinion, crossing that line into anti-Semitism. When I was a counselor a few years ago, there was a motion brought by Lionel Perez and myself that Montreal adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. Valerie Plante blocked that. That definition has been adopted by the government of Canada, and since I've been at B'nai Brith, I convinced 5 provinces to do that, so we're now up to 6 provinces. There's over 1,000 jurisdictions in the world who have identified that, have adopted that a definition as the most authoritative definition, aiding civil servants, law enforcement, and decision makers to better recognize and react to anti-Semitism. But Valerie Plante blocked it. So there's a history there where the Jewish community feels that the mayor isn't there when it's us that's being attacked. She did go to Yeshiva Gedola at the border of Outremont and Côte-Nord NDG when shots were fired at that school. It was uninvited, and she wasn't really invited by the community. But other than that, she's been very, very absent, far more absent than other mayors elsewhere. And there haven't been the type of resolutions adopted as some Canadian cities have done that clearly, call out Hamas as a terrorist group, demand that the hostages be released immediately and unconditionally. By the way, the United Nations has passed a Security Council resolution end of December, and yet we haven't seen that Hamas has reacted in any sort of way. And these people are coming to the council to attack a Jewish representative for basically saying, terrorism is wrong, and tearing down the posters that say free the hostages is wrong.
Marvin, the mayor Plante says, well, this was just citizens exercising free speech. How does that translate into a complaint to the municipal commission? I'm just trying to understand what did Mayor Plante do that warrants an intervention by the municipality watchdog?
The complaint was filed by my colleague Hank Topaz of the Quebec Regional Office. There are rules governing question periods at councils, and one of the rules at the agglomeration, like the city council, is there can only be 3 questions on the same subject during a session, to permit others to ask questions on other subjects. Apparently, on December 21st, there were 7 questions targeting Levy. They were allowed by Plante, even though they clearly were not questions on transportation or tax policy, as the citizens said when they registered that they were going to be asking on. And that's part of the nature of the complaint, that the chair didn't do what the chair is supposed to do. Now, the complaint was put in by, Mr. Topaz, and, I'm not sure which I haven't actually seen it, so
I understand.
Don't know which aspects of the complaint he's focusing on.
Okay.
But clearly he says that there was a duty of the chair to enforce the rules, and by enforcing the rules to avoid a situation where many people of good faith will say this was hate and not free speech, from spilling over into the type of divisiveness that I don't think Montrealers want to see. War in the Middle East is not fought at the agglomeration or city council of Montreal. And that's the nature of the feeling that Mayor Plante did not do her duty.
All right, I got to move on because you have a big announcement. I mean, you decided not to run again municipally in 2021, and since then you've been national director at B'nai Brith, Canada, and you have a big announcement for us this morning. Yes,
well, it's true. In June 2021, I said I wasn't going to run again, and I got an unsolicited offer from B'nai Brith the same day, which I accepted to be its national director of its League for Human Rights. They said they wanted to grow B'nai Brith. They promised me authority, latitude, resources, and they wanted to reach clienteles not only in the Jewish community, but outside the Jewish community who didn't know B'nai Brith or didn't work with it. And I did have that authority for the first year and a half of my time there. I've had exceptional results. I got, as I mentioned, 5 provinces to adopt IRA, a whole bunch of them to improve Holocaust education, police departments to outside of Quebec, of course, to allow religious symbols, including kippas, for qualified officers who, qualify in every way except their religious symbols might not be permitted. All that, and then my job was basically downgraded. There's been 2 internal reforms at B'nai Brith, and I just don't feel I can accomplish what I set out to accomplish. As of tomorrow, I'll be leaving at 4:30 in the afternoon. I'll have finished my work at B'nai Brith. I wish them a great deal of luck and a great deal of success. I will be concentrating on building dialogue and cooperation between different racial and religious minorities. There are common issues between the Black, the Asian, Jewish communities, Muslim communities. We have a lot in common, a lot of things that we need to work on in common. And I'm going to try to do that. It was one of the things I worked on in B'nai Brith, but obviously the organization felt that's not its main mission. I'm going to be spending a lot of time doing that. I've already been talking to a lot of people. And I will be advocating on a relatively full-time basis that Deborah Lyons, our new special envoy for preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism, call a second national summit to combat anti-Semitism. The first was in 2021, Erwin Kotler, when he was special envoy, in reacting to the Hamas-Israel war of May 2021 and the upsurge of anti-Semitism at that time, convinced the government we needed to go ahead with a summit. Law enforcement, politicians at the federal, provincial, municipal level, civil servants, educators, all got together, and out of that came some robust new policies, including $5 million to support the special envoy's office. The prime minister headed the Canadian delegation that went to the Malmo conference in Sweden and made some really good promises. Well, I think the situation now is arguably worse. Police departments across Canada are telling us we are seeing an unprecedented surge against hate crimes, targeting many groups, but by far the most the Jewish community. We need solutions, and we need people at the same table to share their experiences. And thus, I've written to Deborah Lyons, and I've written to a lot of groups, and I've asked them, look, can we work together to get this done?
Marvin, I'm sure you still have a lot to do. So, but that's all the time I have this morning. Thank you so much for coming on this morning, and I wish you the best on this new chapter in your public work life, and I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation with you.
Thank you, David. Undoubtedly, we will speak again some weeks or months in the future.
All right, take care. Marvin Rotrand. So you heard it here, the national director of B'nai Brith, until tomorrow afternoon, 4:30.